Hey everyone, so a couple months ago I read this book called The Defining Decade, Why Your Twenties Matter and How to Make the Most of Them Now, which is right here, written by author and psychologist Meg Jay. Now, Dr. Meg Jay has a famous TED Talk on YouTube called Why 30 is Not the New 20. And it's a good video. She did the talk roughly 8 years ago, and it actually summarizes a lot of the key concepts from her book. So I'll link the TED Talk in the description below if you want to check that out. But anyways, yeah, so she's a clinical psychologist and an associate professor of human development from the University of Virginia, who in this book shares, why your 20s matter and how to make the most of your experiences during this defining decade of your life. She uses a lot of the stories from her experiences and what she's learned from her patients as a clinical psychologist and therapist. Now, I've been meaning to do this book review for a while now, so in this video, I want to share, some of the key concepts that I've learned from reading this book. I'm 25 years old and essentially in the center of my quarter life crisis. So if you're one of the 50 million plus 20-something-year-olds in America like me, and maybe looking for some direction and guidance and insight, about your life, during this honestly dynamic time period, this book and video might be for you. And if you're not in this age group, maybe you're like a teenager entering their 20s, or maybe you're a parent of a 20-year-old, I still think this book is a really good read. So stick around and hopefully give it a read if you have some time. I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to check out the book. I do have several things to say. First things first, I have, if you look very closely, I have the updated edition. You can see it over here. Yeah, so the updated edition, it has several additional chapters and revisions to the book compared to the original one, which I think was published in 2012 or 2013. So just know that in case I make any references and you don't understand what I'm saying, this is not the original version. It has additional content. Number 2, subscribe to my channel. Yeah, it's free. Helps me out a lot. Thank you. Do that now, please. Number 3, while this book does cite a lot of data and studies, it also uses anecdotal experiences, right? What I'm trying to say is there's no right or wrong way to live your 20s. Everyone has their own timeline and goals, and perhaps reading this book might persuade you to change your life in some way. I don't know. To be honest, I actually felt some type of pressure after reading the book, which can be good or can be bad. That can be argued. I'm not really sure, but my advice is not to stress too much about it. Instead, use this as an activity to reflect, on your 20s and what you want out of your own personal life. Also, I know this title is a bit extravagant, so I apologize for that. Just playing the YouTube game a little bit. But anyways, I hope you enjoy the video. All right, so this book is broken down into 3 key sections: work, love, and the brain and body. I want to share 6 key ideas and tips essentially that I learned from reading this book. Timestamps and chapters are added in the description, so feel free to move around if you want. And with that being said, let's begin. All right, so let's start with work. So obviously, when we're in our 20s, many of us are just entering the workforce. And the reality is that I think it's easy to feel lost about what we want, out of our career. How do we find a job and a career path, essentially, where we can make, a good living, a good salary, and then also do meaningful and fulfilling work? I think that's kind of the idea here. 80% of life's most defining moments take place by about age 35. And in terms of your career, 2/3 of lifetime wage growth actually happens during the first 10 years of your career. So obviously a very important time for career development. So tip number 1 I have is to build identity capital. So when I was a freshman in college, I was pretty much going to classes, hanging out with friends, studying, doing homework, going with the flow. I wasn't really growing the way I wanted to or should have been. It wasn't until I started, joining organizations, doing internships, etc., that I really started building this identity capital that I'm talking about. Now, identity capital, as explained by Dr. Jay, is our stock of personal assets, right? So it can be anything professional or even personal that we invest time and energy, into developing for ourselves that become part of our identity. In terms of professional, things we put in our resumes, internships, organizations, degrees, what degrees we get, accomplishments. In terms of personal, it can be the way we speak, the way we look, our hobbies, our relationships. It can be from things like reading a book, studying abroad, internships, creating a nonprofit, anything really. And I think Dr. J had multiple patients that actually really struggled in this area, building, identity capital. I think building identity capital ultimately leads to the construction of a stronger identity, which in the instance of, Dr. J's patients led to overall greater life satisfaction and other positive outcomes like, better stress management and stronger reasoning. I think when we're in our 20s, we want to grow and we want a sense of purpose, right? So the advice overall is to spend time learning new skills, right? Exploring different opportunities, staying committed, and building that identity capital. Tip number 2 is to use weak ties. So when we think about our network, everyone hopefully has some sort of close tie, right? These are the people like, your best friends, your family, anyone essentially that you have a strong connection with, right? So even though I think it's good to have a community of people that you can be close with, I also think it's easy to be complacent in this way, comfortable with this group to the point where it can potentially limit your growth. And I think you'll find that a lot of times, the people in your close community, they can potentially share a lot of the same values and perspectives as you. You're in this like little echo chamber. Well, Dr. Jay makes the claim that for the job market specifically, your weak ties are actually very important. So weak ties are people that maybe, through like a friend of a friend, a colleague from another organization, a department, someone you rarely see, to be honest, and that would be surprised maybe if you reached out to them. So these are the people actually that are more likely to challenge you and to help you grow and to move you forward towards your goals, right? And that's because they have different experiences and different perspectives, which is really good to have. So the advice here is to take advantage of your weak ties in your network. There's a lot of opportunity, people willing to help you grow, probably more so than you might think. So take advantage of that, especially when you're in your 20s looking to progress your career. All right, now let's talk about love. So something that I think we've all noticed in this era is the cultural shift for when people get married. So in the mid-1900s, the average age for a woman to get married was around 20 years old, and for a man it was 22. Now, currently, for women, it's about 28 and 30 for men. So why is this the case? Is it because of hookup culture and, not wanting commitment? Well, that doesn't seem to necessarily be the case according to Dr. Jay. She says, and I quote, "I have yet to meet a 20-something who doesn't want some sort of committed relationship, either now or down the line. According to a 2018 study, roughly 70% of young adults believe in love and want to find, a romantic love. Only 10% of people actually, date casually, and 60% of these individuals want a long-term partner." So I'm not sharing these statistics to scare you. There's nothing wrong with being single at 30 or even 40. Everyone has their own timeline. But the point is that in your 20s, the decisions you make when dating and talking with your partner, they're important. So I want to review some interesting concepts and tips, in this section in regards to love. So tip number 3 is to stop dating down. So Dr. Jay shares a story about a patient of hers that dated down. And I'm not talking about down as in looks. When I say dating down, I'm talking about dating down to an older, inaccurate version of yourself. So this patient of hers, when she was younger, she felt undesirable. And unfortunately, this translated into her dating life in her 20s. These feelings of inadequacy and lack of value, essentially. So what Dr. Jay found was that a lot of 20-year-olds, men and women, they date down, and it can be due to a number of things like low self-esteem, being surrounded by poor relationships, feeling homesick, craving affection. Pretty much dating down is when your purpose for dating originates from an old experience. So essentially an untold story that can creep into your mind and affect your life without you even realizing it sometimes. So the lesson here is this, ask yourself if you're dating down, if you're dating someone that isn't at your maturity level, that doesn't take care of you the way they're supposed to. Yeah, so ask yourself if you're dating down, think about what you want out of a relationship and what you need in a partner. Take your dates and your relationship seriously. This will help you to make sure you're picking the right partners and hopefully to avoid dating down. The next interesting tip in regards to love is to cohabitate carefully. Now this one really shocked me because it was counterintuitive. So in many relationships, people move in or cohabitate with each other kind of as a test, right? To see how marriage would work. You move in with each other to test the waters, kind of. However, there are studies that show that moving in with your partner before marriage actually leads to dissatisfaction and ultimately divorce, which is scary. This is known as the cohabitation effect. Now, Dr. Jay explains how this is likely due to the intention, of the individuals involved. Are you moving in with your partner out of convenience, like cheaper rent, furniture sharing, sex, etc.? Are you going to move to the next step of marriage out of practicality, since you're already living with each other? Or is it going to come from a place of genuine, love and affection and care? I think when you cohabitate, it can be easy to feel the effects of something called lock-in, which is explained in the book as a concept that, you're less likely to change an option due to some initial investment made, which is cohabitating. You already put the investment in. Yeah, I might as well marry now, you know what I mean? That's kind of the idea there. This is why you need to be very clear and intentional when cohabitating, right? Talk with your partner about, what it means to move in, what your goals are. Check in with them about how, they're feeling about the situation. I think that's really important. Remember, it's not even about whether you cohabitate or not. It's about why and how you do it. So the advice is to cohabitate but carefully. Tip number 5 is to don't compare and despair. So this concept is actually explored both in the work section and in the body and mind section. But the general idea is that social media can be really negative on your mental health in terms of your mind and in your career. So many of Dr. Jay's patients talked about feeling inadequate, literally miserable due to social media. And this is due to a psychological principle called upward social comparisons, where we compare our ordinary lives to the epic achievements that we see on social media. And you can't do that. That's so unfair to yourself, because social media, a world where filters and highlights exist, I don't think that's healthy. But nevertheless, we do it naturally. Now, like I said, I do this all the time. I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll see someone making $500,000, or they have some awesome accomplishment, their CEO, their whatever. And then in turn, that'll make me feel bad about my job. Or similarly, I'll go on Facebook and I'll see a friend that just got married and they have a kid, and then I'll start questioning my whole love life. It's not going to be healthy to compare your own life to that of what you see online and on social media for everyone in their 20s. I don't think that's realistic. That doesn't make sense. Instead, I think it's better to focus on, what you want, your own priorities, your own journey in life and how you plan to get there, the steps you want to take to get there. I think that's more important to focus on. Now, this is easier said than done. It might be worthwhile just sacking your entire social media, or at least locking your apps, right? Which is what I currently do. So anyways, the advice here is try not to compare and despair, so just be wary of that. And tip number 6 is to calm yourself. So our generation and age group, to be honest, is not good with dealing with negative news. And I wanted to highlight this because I think it's really important. Our frontal lobe in our brain is actually still developing in our 20s. It doesn't finish developing until we're in the beginning of our 30s. So we're actually very impulsive and emotional during our 20s, which is why we react the way we do sometimes. Dr. Jay noticed that in a lot of her patients, when we encounter anxiety and stress, we tend to develop something called catastrophic thinking. We think the worst is going to happen. We're going to get fired from our job. Our partner's going to break up with us. And we have to learn to calm ourselves. And more importantly, we need to learn how to do this alone and by ourselves. That's really important. Specifically, we need to stop doing something called borrowing an ego. And I know many people like to vent or to call someone when they're stressed. I even do that all the time. I think venting can be really healthy, to be honest. But I also think there's a world where you can overdo it, right? Meaning you just, every time something bad happens in your life, you just call someone. You borrow an ego and you never let yourself process your own emotions, which I also think you need to do. You need to have a balance of that, right? That's what borrowing an ego is. So Dr. Jay recommends that the next time you feel anxiety, either from work or your relationships, try to handle stress on your own. Take a deep breath and try to learn to process and control your own emotions. This can lead to better life satisfaction, even better relationships and a better sense of purpose even. So next time you're stressed, calm yourself down and see if that helps out. All right, so those are the 6, most interesting concepts that I got out of this book. There's obviously a lot more chapters and ideas that I didn't even mention. So I highly recommend you check out this book and let me know what you think. I think it provided a lot of interesting data and studies. Obviously, there was a lot of cool statistics that I didn't know about. I didn't know about the cohabitation effect. I thought that was really surprising. And obviously, I think your 20s are important, but I do want to emphasize that, even though your 20s are, very dynamic and glamorized in society a lot, everyone has their own journey. And even though there's definitely a lot of pressure to achieve and execute and do things in your 20s, your 20s aren't everything. And I think that's important to remember and to understand. We all have our own goals and priorities in life, and we don't need to rush to fit a timeline that other people think is best or better for us, right? So I just want to leave that thought there. And live the life that you want to, because I think that's the beauty of our 20s. I want to end this video with a quote from the end of the book that I felt was really motivational and empowering. So it goes like this: "The future isn't written in the stars. There are no guarantees. So claim your adulthood. Be intentional. Get to work. Pick your family. Do the math. Make your own certainty. Don't be defined by what you didn't know or didn't do. You are deciding your life right now." All right, thanks guys. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next week. Peace.